Hello, we are going to reconvene our special meeting since we are just now going onto YouTube. Today is Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. And our next item up on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If everybody could please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda, we are going to take a moment of silent reflection. Okay, thank you guys for that. And we're just going to move along. The next section on the agenda is action from the executive session. I will entertain a motion.
I move the governing board accepts the hearing officer's recommendation that the student is guilty of the charges made against the student, but that the following action should be taken as an alternative to long-term suspension. And that would be placement at an alternative education facility within the district for the remainder of the 22-23 school year.
A second.
Having a first and a second, I will go through the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Ms. Moran,
Yay.
Mr. Honak,
Yay.
I am also a yay, so motion passes. Next up on the agenda would be community opportunity for comment. We have none tonight, so we're just going to move on to the next item. Section 7, which is recognitions and presentations. We are going to start with reviewing the stakeholder feedback as collected from McPherson and Jacobson. This is going to be presented by Mr. Grotting and Jennifer Tanner. This is for information and discussion only. And I will let you guys know, please make sure you speak clearly into the microphone so that our people at home on YouTube can hear you and our Zoom participants as well. Thank you. Oh, just one second.
Absolutely. Madam Chair, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. For the record, my name is Don Grotting, and this is Jennifer Tanner with McPherson and Jacobson search firm. And we're here to share with you our findings from the 8 different stakeholder groups that we conducted on March 8th and March 9th. We would ask that you let us get through our presentation, and then we're willing to answer any and all questions at the end if you have some specific questions. I believe that the board has the executive summary along with the findings in each particular stakeholder group. I also want to take this opportunity to acknowledge what great staff you have. They have been here and helped us along the way, all the way from logistics to preparing the stakeholder meetings. And so it's really been a pleasure to work here in the school district. I also want to say, while we conducted 8 meetings, one of the meetings was a classified meeting, and we did not have any participation, but also I want to acknowledge that on that particular day, there was a funeral for one of your beloved teachers, I believe, who was in a tragic bicycle accident. The rest of the stakeholder meetings we conducted included somewhere in the neighborhood of 75 to 80 different participants. And all of the meetings went very well. Folks conducted themselves in a very professional manner, and I believe that they were very transparent in their recommendations as you look forward to hiring the next superintendent. With that, I am going to turn it over to Mrs. Tanner, and she's going to go over what were the great things about the Litchfield School District that our stakeholders responded to in the executive summary.
Good evening. This was it's always a great thing to talk with your stakeholders about, because they come and they're excited to share with us the great things that are happening here. So just to go through some of those, first of all, it's a great place to live as far as weather, location, safety, at least this time of year, right? So that was considered a plus. Great teachers, support staff, and administrators. That was the first thing we heard every time we went to the meeting was about the great staff that is here. Also a school district with a true sense of community, wonderful parent and family support, and also volunteers. A great place to live in regards to weather, talked about that. Many learning opportunities for students, meaning sports, clubs, programming. There was a good variety of that for their students. Structured and intentional professional development for staff to improve their skills and support students. That was something that was extremely important to staff, was to feel like they were receiving that professional development. Litchfield School District is a destination for teachers wanting to come long-term. The district is financially supported by passage of overrides and bonds. That here you have an outstanding special education programming. Litchfield is a growing district and community. That was seen as a positive, and facilities are well maintained, safe, and in good condition. And also that there were recently positions added to help support the superintendent.
The next question, what are the issues the incoming superintendent should be aware of as he or she comes into the Litchfield School District? Without a doubt, one of the number one trends that we saw from all stakeholder groups is someone having the ability to work with the school board to build trust, professionalism, define roles and responsibilities that will help them govern more effectively to benefit students, families, and staff. I think if you look through some of the specific comments, it was really trying to, if at all possible, and I know all school boards are in difficult times right now, but trying to keep the politics out of the school business, to be more student-centered focused, and to keep students at that focus, and make sure that board meetings are governed with professionalism. I believe that in one of the groups, if you read through some of the specific issues there, they talked about, they believe that some of this behavior is impacting staff, which eventually impacts students. So anything that the new person can come in, has the ability to sit down, work with the school board, try to provide unity, discuss the problems, discuss differences. School boards, individual board members, there's always going to be differences, but you try to keep students at the center, keep politics out of it, and really focused on the students and families and staff in the Litchfield School District. One of the things was they'd like to see somebody who can address the growth of the district. That was also a positive, though, as Jennifer talked about coming in. It's really nice to be coming into a district that is growing. Somebody that's able to work with the leadership team and others to evaluate, monitor, and make changes to systems, programming, and curriculum and instruction, supporting students and families. Once again, the next one I'm going to talk about is something that every school district, not only in Arizona, but across the nation is going through, and that is to be able to address staffing recruitment and retention. Along with that comes somebody that could come in and work to build morale. I think Litchfield, not like other school districts, you're starting to see a lot of staff burnout, which includes everything from teachers to classified staff, administrators. And so someone that could come in and try to find ways to build morale. Working with stakeholders to construct a new strategic plan. And as we know, that'll be that's a lift that a leader's going to have to come in. It's my understanding that it's time for a new strategic plan in the Litchfield School District, and hopefully somebody that has some either experience or planning to work with a team, to work with the board to prepare and construct your new strategic plan for the district. And this came through loud and clear, especially from parents and staff. Ensure the district is student-centered in all of their decision-making, maintaining students at the forefront of all decision-making that comes up there. Just going back to a little bit of the some of the information that we talked about with all the stakeholders groups, it came through loud and clear. Litchfield is not broken. It is a great school district, a sought out after school district. And from all the stakeholders, they're very proud of your school district. Parents, staff, district office, administrators, the business community, very, very proud of this school district. So somebody is going to be able to come in and take over, and a lot of great things happening in this school district. And now we'll let Ms. Tanner take over the last one.
And then the last was, we asked them what characteristics or traits should the new superintendent have? And these were kind of encapsulate everything. They really want to have someone that has a vision and is able to clearly communicate what that vision is to all stakeholder groups. The ability to work with the school board to move the district in a positive direction. Again, it was very much about working with the school board, working together in unison to further the district. Be visible in the school district and community. That was important for them to not only be on school sites, but to also be involved in community efforts all the way up to state level type efforts. To be a strong leader, not afraid to stay the course in difficult times. They would like to see proven success as an education leader in difficult situations. They also focused on academic achievement and success, and have a successful track record on that. Especially it came through over and over, the ability to collaborate and empower others, to be working together with school staff and all those within the district. Financial awareness and expertise with prioritizing a budget. And again, ability to not be political and help board to stay focused on students. So those were the traits and characteristics that were expressed by your stakeholders. You guys have any questions?
So I will go through everyone so that everybody gets a chance to ask their questions. Ms. Clymer, I'm gonna let you start.
I don't have any questions. Just thank you for attending all of the meetings. I know it was quite a long week, several days, but it's been a priority of this board, and I know the administration, to collect as much feedback as we can throughout this process. I know there's still more opportunities to go. So thank you for spending the time with their stakeholders and getting this. Just the executive summary is great. I know there's pages and pages of additional information for us to go through. So I appreciate it.
Mr. Owens, did you have any questions?
Yeah, no questions. I think that this is helpful. I think that none of these really are surprising. I think these are all kind of characteristics and qualities you want of any superintendent. I think, some of them do hit the nail on the head and pinpoint some of the things that we have at LESD are facing. But overall, the theme that you got and that we know is that whoever applies for this job and gets this job is walking into, in my opinion, a dream superintendent position, despite our flaws. The community support we have, the teachers, the staff, the administration that we have. So I hope, has it closed yet? The
Yeah.
app's
The
closed?
applications are
Yes.
closed. Yep.
Some people missed out then maybe, huh?
Ms. Moran, did you have any questions or comments?
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Honak, did you have any questions or comments?
I was having trouble. My only comment was that I was applauding all the way through and I used very great self-control, keeping my microphone muted while I was applauding. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. I also have no questions. Thank you very much for getting this feedback for us. I agree with Mr. Owens. None of this is very surprising, kind of to me, tells me that I think we're kind of all on the same page, the community, the board. We all are looking for very much similar things, which is going to make our job a lot easier when we have to go through all the many wonderful candidates I know you guys are going to bring to us soon. So thank you so much for putting that together for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And once again, great staff, great school district. Somebody is going to have a great opportunity to follow through on the good work that's already been done here. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up on the agenda is the 23-24 budget planning discussion continued from our previous discussions we've been having. This is going to be presented by Mr. Vaughn, Ms. Reichs, and also Ms. Duplain together. So I will turn this over to them, and they have breaks in between. So remember, they'll present and then they'll give us a chance to ask questions. So just be prepared.
You're stealing my thunder. All right. Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, colleagues, and community, thank you for joining me tonight to discuss the district's budget for the 2023-2024 fiscal year. Tonight, we will be covering a variety of topics associated with next year's budget, some of which is a review or update of previous areas we've already discussed, and other items are new. First, we will cover some additional information on the district's contracted guest teachers, as well as the substitutes the district receives from our third-party vendor. This slide presents data that was provided to the district from Educational Services, Inc., the third-party vendor who manages substitutes for most districts in the area. It shows that for Litchfield, that we have more superintendents in our subpool to pull from than other districts in the area or similar sized districts in the state. It also shows that using January as an example, Litchfield has a higher fill rate through ESI than does comparison districts. However, the district has also added contracted guest teachers onto staff to supplement the substitutes ESI can provide. Bless you. This slide shows the impact of those guest teachers on our fill rate. Through February, we have had anywhere from 10 to 18 guest teachers on staff, and they've filled 994 daily vacancies that ESI has not been able to fill in that time. When looking at this through the percentage of our need that's being filled, our contracted guest teachers are moving our fill rate an average of over 5% on any given month. Together, this data provides insight that we're getting more from our partnership with ESI than surrounding districts and similar districts, and that our efforts to expand our ability to fill vacancies with contracted guest teachers is working well. For these reasons, we believe we should continue the contracted guest teachers into fiscal year 2024 to help ensure that we have as much coverage for when teachers are out as possible. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions you might have about the contracted guest teachers and would welcome any feedback you'd be willing to share on the district's recommendation to continue contracted guest teachers for fiscal year 2024.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions or comments on this section?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you for the data here. I think it's nice to see that even though we feel like our fill rate isn't where we want it to be, that we seem to be sitting in a much better position than some of our peer districts or even nearby districts. So it's good to know that we at least have a bigger pool to pull from at this point. In terms of the change in fill rate, you say that there's anywhere from 5% on a monthly basis. Can you equate that to, I'm sorry, I lied. I did have a question. Can you equate that to what that means in terms of classrooms? I mean, how do I transfer that number into, additional classes covered, let's say?
Yeah, so I think as opposed to the 5%, the 994 vacancies filled by those on-staff substitutes is probably an easier way to see the number of classrooms we're getting a teacher into because of those. The percentage can be a little bit difficult to think about because the number of absences on any given month also fluctuates, as you can see on the slide. That's why I wanted to give both bits of data, because depending on how you're wanting to think about it, one is easier to kind of wrap your head around than the other, for sure.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So the 994 is from August or first day of school through the end of February.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Owens, did you have any questions or comments on this section?
No questions.
Ms. Moran, did you have any questions or comments on this section?
I don't have any questions, but I'd like to make a comment. I appreciate the data and the way that this has been laid out. I've championed this idea since we started it, and I'm really hopeful that we can continue this even past the ESSER dollars that we have that are going to be running out at the end of the 23-24 school year, because I do believe this program helps to combat teacher burnout and allow our teachers to take the much needed and hard-earned time off that they need to take even throughout the school year when we have students that are in place. So I'm grateful that we have a good number of these contracted guest teachers in place, and that they are helping to fill in those gaps and give those teachers the reassurance that they have someone responsible and knowledgeable of their students and their campus to take over their classroom so that they can feel comfortable taking that time away.
Mr. Honak, did you have any questions or comments on this section?
Thank you. No questions.
I have no questions on this section either. Thank you.
As a reminder, this slide shows additional positions requested for the special education department for next year. The only change to this slide from our last discussion is the addition of an occupational therapist. The special education department has had an influx of students with occupational therapy needs later in the year, and we anticipate that need continuing and growing into next year. Similar to the occupational therapy position added, most of these positions are simply designed to help meet expected student need for next year. As a reminder, with the increased caseload, we have also included an additional assistant director of special education who would assist in ensuring a focus on compliance and training for the increased special education staff and site level principals, teachers, and students, with the ultimate goal being increasing student achievement for those students. It's important to remember that we are required to provide free and appropriate public education to those students, and our special ed department puts in significant effort to do so as efficiently as possible. Since the 2012 school year, the number of students with IEPs has grown 54%, and we have not added administrator level support for special education in that time. Hold on. This slide shows the new position requests outside the special education department. This slide has been modified primarily to show a clarification in the title to the purchasing position being requested after working on the job descriptions. No change in cost, simply what we're proposing calling that purchasing position. This slide shows position changes recommended for next year. The one change here is to include a district media specialist position. Presently, this work is being done by an employee who works on a part-time stipend basis. This employee has been doing that work for years, but has turned in notice that she would like to retire. To ensure that we still have someone covering those duties, we would recommend changing that stipend back to a position to fill. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions you might have about the new positions and position change requests. I would welcome any feedback you'd be willing to share on this section.
Ms. Clymer, did you have feedback or questions on this section?
I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
Yes. So for the special education positions, the assistant director, that'd be an administrator, not at a school, that'd be like a office.
Right. And I'll have Megan fill in any blanks that I'm missing, but my understanding is that the idea or concept is that the two assistant special ed directors, if approved, would effectively have half of the district each to focus on providing supports to the schools so that more consistent supports could be provided at the school level. So while it's an administrative position, the focus would be at schools. Megan, do you want to? Okay,
So we already have one. This is adding a second one.
yes.
How many schools have special education again? All of them?
All.
All of them? Okay. And then the occupational therapist, that's just a new one. We already have some of those.
Yes.
Cool. That's it. Just wanted to clarify.
Ms. Moran, did you have questions or comments on this section?
I do have a question. I have one comment and one question. I'll start with the comment. So in this document, as well as in a couple of other documents I've seen lately, we've started using, and we've been using for years, the terminology sales, stride, labs. Can we just make sure that we're explaining what that is? Even as a governing board member, I don't always remember exactly what each of those types of classrooms, what that stands for. So I think making it as simple and easy to understand would be appreciated. My question is in regards to and we may have talked about this at the last meeting when we discussed this slide, but these new positions are due to expected student need. So what happens if we don't have the student need that we're expecting? I understand in the gen ed department, it's easier to move people around, or, we kind of have these thresholds where we get to a certain number and then we add an aide, and then we have a different step that we do before we start dividing classrooms and adding actual teachers. So I'd like to know a little bit more about how that works in the special ed department, because clearly here, we're looking at $700,000. And it's saying, part of it is saying expected student need. And I just want to know a little bit more about how we are determining that and what we would do if we don't actually have the need that we're expecting.
Thank you, Board Member Moran. When we review our data and we look to see how many preschoolers are coming up to kindergarten, how many fifth graders are going on to our middle schools, that is how we determine the need for our additional programs. So just like in Gen Ed, we are truly basing this request on the numbers that we have, with a small percentage of growth that we allow, just like in our gen ed rooms. But if for some reason, let's say in our stride programs, we had a lot of children move in, and in our sales we didn't, then we would determine that we would move that teacher over to fulfill the need to ensure our class sizes are what we expect them to be in our stride program, if that makes sense.
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you.
And then Megan, just for the benefit of everyone, would you mind informing everyone what the different programs mean?
Okay, you're putting me on the spot. I will describe them instead of talking the acronym, okay? So our stride programs, all of our programs are cross-categorical. That means that they're based on needs, not necessarily the eligibility. So all of our children all of our programs could have any child with a disability in there. It's based on needs. So our labs programs are programs that are created for children who are academically ready to go, but behaviorally, emotionally, and socially, they have different specialized needs that require an IEP in those areas. So that is our labs program. Our stride programs, our stride program is focused more on structured teaching, more so for children who are on the autism spectrum. And our sales programs are for children who need life skills, academics, inclusion. A lot of our children in the sales program may have an intellectual disability with wide ranges of that. So, but like I said, all of our programs could have any child with any disability, but we just have more focused, the focus based on needs and the structure of those programs. And they all are an acronym, and I'll send it to you all in the Friday update, but I would hate to sit here and try and remember all of them right now.
Mr. Honak, did you have any questions or comments on this section?
Very informative, no questions.
I don't have any questions on this section either. I will echo what Ms. Moran said. I think that we should have a little acronym sheet on our website that tells everybody what they are. And when you have new board members in, like when Mr. Owens came on, he should get a sheet that has all that. Just an idea.
It would also help when you have new executive directors of finance.
Right. That's you. See, whenever you're new to the district, you should get a little acronym like cheat sheet.
All
And
right.
really old board members too.
Right. I'm glad we can joke with each other. All right. Based on governing board feedback discussed at the last budget study session, we've also been exploring moving classified specials teachers to an extended schedule by adding hours. To remind everyone of this discussion, these employees are employed at the elementary and K-8 schools to teach specials classes beyond music and PE. All elementary schools have certified full-time teachers teaching music and PE. During that discussion, we understood from the governing board that we should consider more prioritization type data related to this decision to provide more data to mitigate the potential budget impact. Towards this goal, we've designed a survey that will help impacted elementary schools prioritize between classified specials teachers receiving more hours, the temporary grade level aides added to elementary schools for this current year, and the coming budget cuts for years 2025 and 2026. Tonight, I will present the survey to you for feedback prior to us releasing it. And based on feedback we received from Superintendent's Advisory Council, I will also be recording a video with the help of Sam and his team to introduce the survey and provide information around the different options and budget impact. This slide shows the primary survey questions. The first outlines the three options to allow the person taking the survey to prioritize between the three. The three options are moving classified employees teaching specials to 40 hours per week, the existing three grade level aides supporting kindergarten through third grade, and a middle option where one aide is maintained and the classified specials teachers are moved to 35 hours per week. The second question asks how many grade level aides they would be willing to give up to support their top prioritized choice. This will help us gauge the strength of their prioritization and see if offsetting the cost in this way is seen as a viable option from staff. This slide shows the budget impact of the various options associated with the classified specials. It's important to note here, and I'll cover it in the introductory video prior to releasing the survey, that at 35 hours a week, the employees would receive access to medical insurance, but not dental or paid holidays that they would receive at 40 hours per week. Since our last discussion on this topic, we've also gathered data on the current prep or planning time these employees currently receive. We reached out to all schools with these 5.5 hour specials teachers. All schools responded that they receive a prep time of at least 30 minutes per day for planning purposes, and 7 out of the 11 responded that these employees either do not have lunch duties or do not regularly have lunch duties. A compromise to consider based on this data is moving employees to 7 hours per day. It has a significantly lower budget impact, but still would open up these employees to have some additional planning time and would open up the opportunity for additional training and PLC attendance, especially during early release. If the governing board would like to mitigate the budget impact, grade level aides could be cut as described in the survey. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions you might have about the classified specials teachers options and would welcome any feedback you'd be willing to share on this topic.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions or feedback on this topic?
I have 2 questions. On slide 13, it says only ask if they rank the specials or the raise as number 1, but it doesn't appear as if we're asking them about a raise, right?
That was a error. I had initially had a question on that.
Okay,
And forgot to remove that language. Thank you for pointing it out.
I'm sorry. Well, I will have a follow-up. This is not my second question, but as a follow-up to that, I think that it's difficult to look at this survey because we're giving them option A or B when our budget is made up of 1,000 options. And so it's very difficult to say, do I want a grade level aide that helps everyone, or do I want a classified specialist person that's only going to help them in terms of, their daily things. So I think it's great. I want to see the information and all of that. I just think it's difficult because if you were to say, a raise for myself and they're willing to give it up, that says a lot. That said something different than maybe what they're being asked here. So I'm interested to see the survey, but I wish there would have been more options in terms of prioritization, because I think that would have been a better a gauge of what they really want. My second question is, what is the district's recommendation here? We talked about this last time, and I know the board kind of said what they wanted, but what is the district's recommendation, the administration?
I think we have a lot of interest in seeing this data of the survey as well. We did the previous survey on the grade level aides, and we previously discussed that it told us that everybody likes the additional supports, but it didn't really provide the option to prioritize it against anything else. Because I believe it was at our last study session. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, so if I do, please correct me. But I believe it was you who said, you would be supportive of a change like this, but you'd like to see the budget impact be much lower. What I've heard from talking to different administrators is that they would be open to a change like this, but similar to what you've shared, it's the cost of it is pretty substantial. So they'd like to see some movement there. However,
does that mean like some hybrid version of this? Is that what you mean?
Well, so right, like you'll notice the middle option is not giving them 40 hours, giving them 35. So that's still quite a bit of additional time because it's moving from 5.5 hours to 7. But you're removing 2 grade level aides to help pay for that additional cost. That helps balance both. And that's where I'll be very interested to see the results of the survey, to see if that's a trade-off the schools that are going to be impacted are interested in making.
Okay. So just to sum that up, the administration does not have a recommendation right now.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Owens, did you have questions or comments on this section?
If that was for me, I have no questions.
That was not for you, but no questions for you. So we will skip you then, and it's your turn. But go ahead, Mr. Owens.
I don't know. I guess I have a hard time believing you guys don't have any recommendations. Like, are we waiting for the survey results then?
We haven't released the survey because I wanted to give the board opportunity to provide feedback in case we wanted to modify the survey. But I would personally really like to see the results.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, like I skipped ahead to the next one.
Oh. I was just going to that slide because of our discussion, but
yeah. I don't love how it's written in that where it talks about the cuts needed to be made, where you throw in the 3.5, because we're not talking about 4.1 or 3.9 or 3.6 million. We're talking about 100,000, 100,000, 400, 600,000. I think it looks scary when you see 4.1, but 600,000 is more tangible in that if you look at the 400,000, what the impact it could have. So do we not do something now because we're worried about, 400,000 in 2026? I'm more inclined to, I don't know, you don't want to punt, but you don't want to, kick the can, but I guess we'll just wait for the survey results, but okay.
Ms. Moran, did you have any comments or questions on this section?
Yes, I do. I think to extrapolate maybe a little bit on what Board Member Owens was saying, I feel like this survey is pigeonholing the board into two options. And I think when it comes to fiscal year 2026, we're going to have multiple programs that we're going to need to evaluate to determine the effectiveness on student success. So I don't think we should be saying you get more specials time, which means less aid time, or you get more aid time, which means less specials time. I think there's a way to have both of those. And I think there are many other programs that should be taken into consideration that we could look at from a budget standpoint that might impact, or that definitely would impact the budget. So I think this is premature. I agree with Board Member Owens. I mean, we really are trying to manage today with years down the road when many factors are going to change with those years down the road. So the board has said we would like to see an expansion of specials hours. Now, we don't know exactly what we want that to look like, I don't think, but we also know that we've received great feedback on these grade level aids. So I'd like to see us continue both. And I think, you know, it feels like we're punting and we're saying, we don't want the blame. And the administration is saying, we don't want the blame. We want to get the survey from the staff and let the staff make the decision. And staff feedback is great, but I think we need data, actual data to look at to say, what has the impact been? Not just how do you feel about this, or what do you personally think is a priority for specials versus grade level aids? We need to have some actual concrete data instead of, and I understand a survey is a piece of that, but I don't support the way this is being presented, because I think there are many other factors that need to be considered other than just these two programs being pitted against each other.
Mr. Honak, do you still have no comments?
You know, I mean, I kind of agree with Ms. Moran, you know, in that there are other things in the future, and it kind of is making it one or the other. But in defense of what is being presented is, you know, you got to rob Peter to pay Paul, or whatever is what's going on here. And we're, you know, for us, you know, I don't know if we're supposed to think of other ways to do it. I don't know. No, I guess it should be presented. So yeah, I guess that's kind of a little bit, I'm not going to criticize this presentation. I mean, it's a tough situation, and this is one option, but we probably should be looking for more. Sorry to be so wordy. Thank you.
Okay. My comments are, I kind of agree with my board members in that we're asking for like $1.8 million for new positions. And none of those are an option to not have for us to do the specials thing. We know that specials is the student's favorite part of the day. We know that having specials for our students is a way to give them a well-rounded education. It allows them to use different parts of their brain. It makes them excited to be at school when maybe they don't like all that other traditional stuff that they have to do. We know that our specials teachers we just got an email from somebody today that gave us the description of what their job is, and it is not what a specials teacher does by any means. So we need to start treating them more like they are teachers. And I understand that we're not looking to hire certified teachers for these positions, but we should still treat them like the teachers that they are, because they teach all 600, 700, 800 students in the school every week. They have to create lesson plans for 6 to 9 different grade levels, depending on what campus you're at. They have to do all the work of a teacher for all the different grade levels, and we need to give them the same respect, the same time, the same abilities to be able to have the professional development that they need so that they can work with their students. These teachers come in and they're just thrown in and said, go teach right now, without having that professional development that we give our teachers before the school year starts, without learning classroom management skills, without any of the programs we have and we offer for our teachers. We're not offering that for our specials aids. So I want to see us do this, and I want to see us do this as soon as possible. And I don't think that giving them your aides, which help a whole grade level, that's great that this one person helps a whole grade level. The specials teacher teaches all the students in the entire campus. So I think we have to figure out a way to do this. And I think we have to look at other things that we can cut if we really have to cut something. But I don't necessarily think that that's where we are right now. We keep throwing this number at us and it feels like it's to scare us from wanting to add things that are important to us. And I don't like that. I think that feels not great.
Has everyone given their feedback? Can I ask a question?
I think everybody is given their feedback now.
So I just want to provide a little bit more context on why I wrote the survey this way, but then I do have a question. We could, well, I guess I'm just jumping to my question. Sorry. So there's definitely different things we could do here. We could not do the survey if the governing board believes that the data would not be helpful in making the decision, because I don't want to do a survey if the data is not helpful. Alternatively, we could expand the prioritization options to include some of the additional budget items that are being considered for next year. The reason I initially focused on the aides were two reasons. One, they are already existing. My understanding is that initially they were only initially approved for 1 year. So trying to get more data on if the schools wanted to prioritize keeping those. That's why the 3 grade level aides is one of the 3 options. But as far as making some of the other changes other than the new positions, classified employees are where we have some leeway. You know, like we've already provided contracts to certified employees for next year, obviously not for the unapproved positions, but for the existing positions. So moving things around there for next year would be much harder because we've already offered contracts, but we haven't yet for classified. And so if we wanted to make a change to help mitigate the budget impact of this for next year, the aides would be one area you could do it. For sure, we could also choose to not mitigate the budget impact and worry about that in 2025 and 2026. But that's why I had presented it that way. So can I just get some feedback on if we think the survey is helpful, if we still want to do it, or if we don't think that data would be helpful?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask everybody 2 things. 1, if we think the survey data would help us in making a decision. And 2, if we want them to give us options for mitigating that expense, or if we do not, because I don't want to make you take a lot of time. If the board doesn't care, I'd rather just, that now, as far as that goes. So if you can
appreciate it.
Thank you. So Ms. Clymer.
Ask your second question again.
So
Please.
do we want options to mitigate that expense of making the specials teachers full-time or 35? Maybe we're just talking about those 2. I don't know. But do we want to be presented options on how to mitigate that expense? Or is that not something we want to look at this year? Are we willing to say, yes, we would like to potentially do this without having to cut something else this year?
Understood. What was the first question again? I'm sorry.
Well, the survey, doing the survey.
Yes,
will it
survey.
help us?
I knew I was going to get there. Thank you. I'm going to answer the second question first, because I think it will get me to the survey better. The answer that I want to give you for the survey is we have always been fiscally conservative in this district, which is why we're in the situation that we're in. Yes, we are going to have to make cuts over the next couple of years, but we're not making nearly as deep as cuts as other people are going to make. So I want to be careful that we toe into this water and not just full on jump off the high dive, knowing that in just another year or 2, we are going to have to make cuts. So I do want to be mindful of that. So to answer the second question is, for me, it's, of course, I want to see how we can mitigate these costs with something else. I don't necessarily think it has to be. Please tell me that wasn't like some kind of child trying to get in this building or something from the playground. that whether, I understand that we've already had contracts out, we already have other things going, and that's understandable, right? We've made those decisions and we have to live with that. But is this really the only thing in the budget, the only line item that could potentially be modified at this point in order to free up funds? So if the answer is yes, then the answer to my first question is yes, then send the survey out as it is. Because if that is their only option, I'd like to see them prioritized. That makes sense to me. If there are other options and they're all going to be equally painful, I assume, then I think we need to modify the survey to show what those options are and actually prioritize, not just 2 options, but 4 options, because then you really start to see where people's priorities come to bear, because it's not just A or B, it's I have to actually prioritize between all of them. So if there are options to mitigate that, now is the time to put them forth so that everyone has equal footing when answering the survey and the board has equal footing in terms of what we're looking at. And, because if I were a staff member and answered the survey tomorrow, and then 3 weeks from now, we say, well, they prioritize something that we didn't want. And so now we're just going to find another way to pay for it. So we keep what the staff wants, but we also keep what we want. That doesn't make sense to me. So I think that we should go into this looking at what are the options that we can change, and then we can prioritize what those are. And if these are the only 2 things, then I am supportive of going out with a survey this way. I don't think that's the case, but if it is, then I would be supportive of that.
I have an option.
Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of, I think, echo a lot of what board member Clymer said, but a little different. I have a hard time believing that there's only 2 options, that if it's this or that. If that's the case and there is no other alternative, then we'll figure it out in a year or 2, because I think that cutting aides so that we can add this isn't going to help our students. And so I don't think we need the survey if there are no other options.
Ms. Moran, did you have answers?
Yeah, so, I'm usually very fiscally conservative, but this is one area that I actually think we would best be able to answer these questions ourselves, meaning as a board, as an administration, as specials teachers, as other types of teachers, as our just campuses in general, if we actually knew what having classified specials teachers at 40 hours a week, or at least at a more expanded schedule, even if that's 35 hours a week, what that actually would look like and the impact that has to the campus. Right now, we're just speculating. Well, what if we had this? What would that look like? And I think putting this program in place for a year or 2, and then coming back and evaluating is a better idea, because we know we have multiple programs, whether that's math specialists or many programs that we've put in place with the ESSER funds, that we're going to have to evaluate all of those things. And I think that's going to be a difficult conversation, but I would rather us at least try this and take a risk and see what is the impact that this has, because we may come back, and this might be like the contracted subs, where we come back and say, this is a great program, we really want to keep this. What do we have to do to keep this program? Because when we get these expanded specials, we might come back and say that. We might come back and say the opposite, but I don't think this survey is going to give us those results. I think it might give us an indication, but until we know, we're not going to know. So sort of summarize, I think we should take the risk and keep the grade level aides and expand the specials teachers in some capacity, as well as I don't think that the survey results are going to give us what we need to try to make this decision. So I would be against a survey at this point.
Mr. Honak, can you answer those 2 questions, please?
We can have our cake and eat it too. I think we should be opening ourselves up to all kinds of possibilities first off, there's a school district that just turned down students, college students wanting to be teachers who are student aides at the school. And we should be reaching out and saying, come to LEST, because we would be getting we would get free teacher aides, probably better than the ones we're hiring. Secondly, in Europe, 7th and 8th graders should be student aides in kindergarten, first, second grade for an hour a day or so, because that's part of them maturing and learning how to deal with kids. And they have the patience to really be imaginative. It's a very healthy symbiosis. So I think that the problem with it is everybody's saying there's only two choices. We either have to cut this or we can't do that or whatever. But we don't. There's a lot of possibilities that I just don't see being implemented, or even anybody trying to look at them. It's always about, should we spend $1 here or $1 there? When in fact, there are things that are maybe even better right beneath us for free.
Jeremy, can you answer the question about the survey though? They're trying to figure out if they are going to send the survey out to staff. So they'd like to know from us if that's something that we would like them to do or we would not like them to do. And basically, yes, we want them to do it because the survey results are going to impact our decision, or no, we would not like to do it because it doesn't matter really what that says. We're going to make a decision based on what we think is the right thing to do, regardless of what that says. So what is your thoughts?
Okay. So my thing is, if the survey is expensive and really difficult and frustrating, it's probably the results are not worth it. If it's just a simple thing to send it out, see what you get, and it's free, why not? But the survey isn't giving us the answer we want. It's only giving us a little bit of information about one aspect of the situation.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you don't feel like the survey would impact your decision as a board member, what those results are. Is that correct?
I think more information is better, but I don't know. Nobody said how big a problem it is and how much energy goes into this survey. So as I just said, if it's a simple thing to do, if it's a big deal to do it, then I think we should not do it, because we're going to put a lot of weight on it, because we feel like a lot was invested in the survey. So we're going to want to put a lot of weight on it. And I think we should be looking at other avenues also that's not included. Ask in the survey whether people would like student teachers or like to start a program to have other ways to have student aides, so that we can do, make our specials teachers, give them better benefits.
Okay. I don't personally think that we need to do the survey. I think that we have gotten a lot of feedback. I think that those of us in the community hear from people all the time. Those of us that have kids in the school district here, like that are on the board, we've been hearing for years. So I'm comfortable with us not doing the survey, and then just getting the information. I too would like to see us have this program started and address whether or not this is a best way to use our funds in a year or two, after we have that data to tell us what's happening and how that's impacting our students. Because I think that choosing between aides and choosing between specials teachers, that's choosing one good thing for students over another. And I think there's other ways that we can get there, and we don't have to do it right now.
Can I make just one quick follow-up, and then you can, I don't disagree with anything that is said, but I do think one very, very important piece, at least to me, that's critical in this that we haven't heard yet is the administration recommendation. I understand you want to wait for the survey, and the board, we want all the information that we can get, but we're going based on our own experience and what we've heard from feedback from the community and from teachers and staff. But you are the ones that are doing this every day, and you are the experts. So without a recommendation, we are just going based on our own experiences and the feedback that we're receiving from teachers, staff, families, et cetera. So I'm not saying I'm not putting you on the spot today, but before this decision is made, I think the administration needs to come out with an official recommendation of, yes, we want to do this. No, we don't, because that has to be a factor in all of this. That's critical to me to know what you guys really think about this.
So I think that was part of this process, right? Trying to see where everybody's sitting and where you're feeling, also to see if the survey was something that would be an option. Of course, when we would come back, when it's budget time, we're going to highlight which would be our recommendation. Whether you would go with that or not is up to the governing board. So we haven't firmed it up. We've talked about different things, and that's what we put down here of all those different options. So I think that we would have to firm up as a united staff on exactly where we're sitting. I would tell you where I'm sitting right now, and it would be a hybrid version. I think there is several different things that are impacted with jumping all the way to a 40-hour position, as you're seeing with records requests and different things. So there's a lot of different things that impact and a domino effect by making those changes. So yes, we will come back, and with all of these things, we would have a recommendation of what we would recommend. We just didn't know if a survey would give us some additional information to see where. It's really hard when you're looking at different pieces, because you can always vote or say of things in isolation. And when we presented the survey data before, everybody's like, oh yeah, everybody likes to feel good, right? Who's going to say they don't like their aide? So we thought about, well, then we'll prioritizing. It's not saying you don't like them, but is there something that you value more? So I think that's where we thought that information might be helpful, but we also know we don't want to do that if you're not going to find it valuable information.
Understood. I appreciate that. I think we're partway through the process. For me personally, I don't want to get all the way down to the end and fight for this, and really, because I do believe in it. I do think this is a good idea based on my own experience. I don't want to get all the way to the end and the administration come back and say, we're not on board. This is not what we wanted. And so then we're just further down the road, and then the board is sort of, then we're at odds, and I just want to make sure we're doing this collectively. So I hear you. Thank you.
Can I add one comment?
Go ahead.
What I do think would be useful in future discussions on this would be to see actual data on how those additional aids are being utilized. I understand they're likely not being utilized consistently on every campus, but I would like to see feedback and information as to how those additional grade level aids are currently being utilized, because I think that would be very important. I know how they were like idealized to be utilized, but I would like to see in reality how they are being utilized on every campus, so that the board can take that into consideration as well, if that's going to be something that we're going to have to consider cutting back on in our future budget talks.
Superintendent Gunning, would it be possible? I understand that. I don't know that we'll be able to get data in the way that we normally look at data for these aids, because some of the benefits to our staff are really intangible. I really believe that's the truth for these aids, but can we get like just a paragraph from each principal or somebody on each campus that says, here's what our aids do on our campus? And it doesn't have to be some big, huge thing, but it just gives us like a basic overview. Here's what we do with our aids on our campus for these specific ones that we allocated.
I think we already have that information. So we
Perfect.
Yeah. In the prior survey that was presented, we did ask each participant how the aids were being used on their particular campus. The way we presented that was at a very rolled up level, but we could de-aggregate that.
Would that be helpful in answering your questions right now, Ms. Moran?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything else on this, or do you have any more questions for us on this, Mr. Vaughn?
One question and then a comment. So just to summarize what I'm hearing, it sounds like ideally what we would like to see, and to be honest with you, I don't think we can get it before the end of this budget cycle, just because of where we are in the cycle, is a prioritization of a wide swath of what makes up our budget. I'll talk about this in some more detail towards the very end of the presentation, but that is my expectations for next steps on building a plan to manage that future budget cut. But given time constraints, I honestly don't think we could put that together for this budget cycle. But it is good to hear that it sounds like we're on the same page, that that's where we need to head long term. And then since it doesn't sound like we need the survey that was presented, would you mind entertaining just a little bit more discussion about the difference, if the board is open to the concept of 35 hours versus 40?
Yes, Ms. Clymer, go ahead.
I will be honest, I don't know the exact differences between, where they are now, what 35 and what 40 hours would look like in terms of their day planning, being part of the PLC process, and their role on campus. So without knowing those details, yes, I do. I would like to, I would entertain that more to see where that would fall. And again, even within that, we could prioritize, okay, if it gives them additional planning time, if it gives them an opportunity to be part of the PLC process, if it gives them X, Y, or Z, maybe we could prioritize that. And if we could get that, our top priorities in 35 hours, I would be open to that. If we have to go to 40, then, we could look at that as well, but I'm open to that hybrid selection.
Mr. Owens.
This is a lot for a board member for like the first 2 months. I don't even budget my finances. So I am I know what you talked about, like it's too late now but we're honestly going to start the next budget as soon as this one's passed, right? So me personally would like to see, like the next budget broken down like way more, because there's so much money in this budget that I don't even know where it's going. Because it's either pulled in, it's grouped together, it's in this bucket, it's in this bucket. And here we are squabbling over, $300,000-$400,000 of a $96 million budget. It just seems crazy to me to think that we have to pit these two against each other, or that there's not something else where we can say, yeah, you know what, this would be really cool to have, but we have the opportunity to at least compare them. And I don't know if we're going to have that again before we approve this final budget or not, but in my opinion, and board member Moran mentioned it earlier, we want to be fiscally conservative, but in 2 years or in a year, there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to review, and it's going to be difficult, but I would much rather have an opportunity to compete in 2 years, to stay, than to never give it a chance. And so to me, I think that in the grand scheme of things in our overall budget, we have the opportunity to add, to move the classified specials up to 40 hours per week without cutting aides, and then, see how it goes in a year or two when we have additional feedback from the principals at the ground level saying, yes, this is working, or no, you know what, we don't need them for 40. We could go back to 30, or now we have them to put in a list of things where we're actually comparing more apples to apples. So that's where I stand on things, if that helps.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, I think I would be more than happy to entertain a 35-hour a week proposal, which I think is a step in the right direction. And I think once we have that, then we could further evaluate and get feedback as to whether we think the additional 5 hours a week would, what the change and the impact to that would be. I do agree with you, Executive Director Vaughn, that we are late, very late in this budget cycle to dissect the budget with where we are now. And I don't know that we really need to. We're not cutting the fat, if you will, this year, but I do think that for next year, we need to have these budget conversations early and have them often, and make sure that we are digging into all of the areas that we potentially will want to have on the cutting block. And I have tried to introduce some things even this year that we have historically not discussed when it comes to policy that might change some of the budgetary items as well. So I think when we go into next year, I'd like to see us be open to all different sorts of changes and being able to actually go in and say, you know, we don't have to keep every program that we've always had because it's what we have. We need to start looking at what is most impacting student success and how we can prioritize those things going forward. So I look forward to more detail and more data on the budget itself and things that might be optional or subject to change in the next budget cycle.
Mr. Honak.
My impression is that we're kind of crossing over into micromanaging the district. It's not our job. We're supposed to hire a superintendent and set policy to run the district. And then we're sort of to oversee to make sure it's being done. And then, you know, I think that Ms. Clymer saying that, you know, wants to see the recommendations of the administration. And I think, you know, Mr. Owens is bringing up a point that it's just overwhelming, but it's really not our job, I don't think, to sit and look at every dollar. We're to make sure that, you know, there's not any gross, you know, misuse, and that, but most of all, that the policy is set. And I think that the survey, not this survey, but the superintendent, the thing that was presented to us earlier about with the stakeholders, had some pretty fabulous stuff in it of what our priorities are. And as long as we see that, you know, measure things that they're applying in that direction, and we shouldn't be bashful about telling our administrators, hey, come back with something that's going to really fulfill this goal better than that. And then let them sweat it out, because otherwise we're kind of making them dependent on us, that we're supposed to be figuring it out when we meet once every 2 weeks, whereas they're the ones that are actually living with it and are going to probably have some better solutions if we just challenge them, you know, demand that they come up with solutions and present them to us. So I think just philosophically, we're kind of moving a little in the wrong direction. We should look at actually what we're trying to do, getting a new superintendent, and we have some very good data, if you will, of what various stakeholders think that should be in a superintendent. And I think those are pretty much a pretty good definition of what we should do with our goals, one of which was to change our long-term strategy. You know, so that's my take on this.
I would like to see us be 40 hours because I agree with Mr. Owens that the only way this is going to be able to contend with anything else that we're looking at for cuts in a couple of years is if it's something that we have implemented now. I don't think it's something we're going to add later. And I think if we put them at 35, we're never going to put them at 40. So I'd rather make them full-time employees and treat them the same as we would our teachers that are teaching our students every day. That's what I'd like to see happen.
Thank you for the discussion. I really appreciate it. At this time, I'll hand it over to Director Reichs to discuss benefits for the coming year.
Okay. Good evening, President Zeidema, Governing Board members, Superintendent Gutting, and meeting attendees. At our last, oops, I went too far. Okay. At our last governing board meeting, we stated that we intended to reach out to ASBATE to get a better understanding of our annual plan renewal for the medical plan. Michael Vaughn and I met with ASBATE on March 10th. We asked the underwriting team at ASBATE to consider an adjustment to the plan renewal. We received good news from ASBATE today, and the underwriting team reduced our renewal by 1%. You just got to ask. This means that our renewal will be a 5.5% rate increase. And this is much closer to the 5% we've been modeling in our prior study sessions. As a reminder, our proposed budget for fiscal year 24 assumes that the full increase will be passed along to the employees while maintaining the high deductible health plan as the free option for our employee coverage. We have asked ASBATE to deliver a presentation per your request at our April 11th regular meeting, and we will also plan to bring our final recommendation on the 11th. At this time, I welcome any questions or feedback on this benefits update.
Ms. Clymer, do you have any questions or comments on this section?
No questions, but thank you for doing the work and asking the questions, because I guess this is true. It never hurts to ask. And that 1 percentage point, I mean, that's huge now that we're making this change to sort of sharing some of the costs with employees. So thank you for doing that diligent work, because I think it will pay off in the long run.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, ask them if they'll do 5 and we'll sign right now. But no, thanks for asking. That's good. I think it's helpful to the teachers and everybody who's paying into that.
Ms. Moran?
No questions. I will just echo the appreciation for asking the question and being a negotiator. I appreciate that.
Mr. Honak?
I have no questions. Thank you. It was good.
No questions. Thank you so much for asking. I think it's great, and I totally agree. Like, it never hurts to ask. We should always do that. So thank you very much for doing that. We know that we will always be expecting that in the future that we ask. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. I will now turn this over to Executive Director Megan DePlane to talk about recruitment and retention of our student transporters.
Okay, good evening, President Zaidema, board members. I'm here today to talk about different strategies we are implementing as a team to increase recruitment and retention of our student transporters. We know this is critical. We have got to get our children to school as planned every day so that they can learn at the highest levels possible. So first and foremost, Carrie and Sam from our public relations team is in the process of developing a hashtag Drive the Future campaign, and they'll be interviewing student transporters, parents, children to talk about their experience on the bus, because we know that it is critical that our student transporters are a critical member of our team. They are the first to see our children every morning. They're the last Litchfield employee to see our kids every evening. So we really want to highlight them and to see if we can recruit some incredible people from our community or surrounding communities to come join our team. The second thing is our human resources department is continuing to seek out career fairs and different ways we can attract classified employees. They sent flyers to the City of Buckeye's mayor's office to be included in their newsletters. They're really trying to get creative as possible to reach as many people in our community as possible to talk about the importance of student transporters and why we need them, and for them to come see our incredible facilities, meet our director White and his team, and to see if this is something that they'd like to do. So they're really putting an out or farther reach out there. Another thing we really looked, and what we did was Director White and I reached out to several different people in our community in regards to who has had success. We talked to several directors of transportation. We talked to different members from the trust to talk about what are people doing to close the gap of our staffing shortage of our needs and what we currently have. So we are recommending that we convert 10 of our student transport positions to a 40-hour work week. So between the AM and PM routes, these employees will drive preschool midday routes, field trips, and support any other needs in our transportation department. I know we talked before about maybe they can go serve another need in our district. However, when we talked to different people who have tried that, it didn't work. It didn't work to retain our employees. Our student transporters, people that work in transportation, are here to do just that. So we would like to go with that recommendation and see if possibly converting some of our positions, which will then allow people who like the split shift as well to have those options. We are also looking at, and Director White is doing that already, and our team is going to support him with that, providing more opportunities for high quality PD, professional development for all of our staff members. What we know is when we empower our staff members with the tools needed to successfully manage the children and all of the different requirements of being a student transporter, when people feel empowered, that they're more likely to stay in their jobs. So we are going to really look and see what professional development we can offer that we have never offered before. Other transportation, oh, I'm forgetting. Okay, sorry. Other transportation strategies that we've implemented. At our last governing board meeting, the governing board approved the release of solicitation to explore awarding a contract for contracting bus drivers. So currently our district outsources certain routes where we get the driver, the bus and the driver. We are now looking at and moving forward with contracting just bus drivers or just student transporters. The new solicitation will allow the district to compare the cost of hiring just the driver to driver and bus to see what is the most fiscally responsible way we can outsource while not having to cancel routes. And the goal is to provide transportation services as reliably and financially efficiently as possible. So that is what our team is prioritizing right now and really diving into. And these recommendations that we have thus far, we feel will get us there. I also want to bring up that, there may be a chance that we bring to the board, if we do not fill this staffing shortage, that we consider the 2-mile radius. I know nobody wants to do that, nor do we. But we also don't want to cancel routes randomly at different times where people are not prepared to bring their children to school. So I just wanted to throw that out there, but we are hoping that some of these other options will help us fill our openings that we have right now. Just one last update. We currently have 17 openings, but we have 4 trainees in the process. So that is still a considerable amount of openings, and our people that are hired as our dispatchers and our supervisors and our directors are often driving still. And we know that in order to run an effective and efficient and amazing department, that we have to have those people doing their jobs. So I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Ms. Clymer, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I would, I'm not sure you're asking for this feedback now, but I'll give it to you anyway. I would be open to changing the policy for the 2-mile radius. I know we hated doing it last year or 2 years ago, and we're going to hate doing it again. But I think in terms of consistency, to your point, knowing that you have to provide transportation or knowing that it's going to be there every day for your kid to get to school is a nightmare for parents when they don't know if they have to go to work before their child gets on the school bus and then the bus doesn't come to pick them up. You're, really struggling at that point to deal with the situation. So if that policy change is necessary, I would be on board to do that at least temporarily until we can get the situation under control.
Mr. Owens.
Yeah, I don't have any. Yeah. What is like ASBA or other districts or national, like this is not an issue just for us, right? This is just a national issue. Do people think it's going to get better? Like, are these things going to work, or is it just like nobody wants to drive a school bus anymore?
Actually, in a neighboring, in a far east district, far away. No, we talked to a director there, and they have implemented a lot of these things that we were presented today, and they have been able to fill their positions. So we are hopeful. The only problem that I've seen lately is that when we did the increase in pay, we had a lot of candidates and we were hiring. I mean, we felt like, oh my gosh, this is it. And then every time we got one, we lost one. And so we have to really focus on keeping them as well. So we're hoping with options for different the 40 hours versus the 30 hours, and then the trainings and the marketing, all these things together but people are consistently seeing growth in their teams, and they're minimizing the number of routes being canceled. However, it's still going on. Nobody has found the magic answer yet.
Thanks. Thank you.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, so I would like to comment on both of the recommended changes for the student transporters. The first change being the 40-hour work week. I think that is super important. I'm glad that you reached out to other districts to find out that is an option. I think keeping the split schedule and having the 40-hour schedule hopefully is going to be the best of both worlds so that we can have folks that fill both of those. What I will say is that spending that $134,000 seems really like a no-brainer to me based on the number of routes we've had to cancel this year. So I'm glad that we are recommending that increase. And on top of that, what might actually be more important and what you alluded to, Executive Director Duplain, is the PD. So I think what hasn't really been said here is that when we have a bus driver that comes in and is training to drive a bus, we train them how to drive the bus. What we do not do, and what we have not done historically, is train them on how to interact with children and how to manage behavior on the bus. So imagine, if you will, a bus driver is driving the bus. Maybe they have experience with kids, maybe they don't. And they're on a bus, picking up students, dropping off students. Students are eating on the bus. Students are standing up on the bus. Students, some are following the rules, some are not, some are unruly. And bus drivers know how to drive the bus and what they should be doing to follow all of those rules, but we haven't necessarily trained them on how to manage the behaviors on the bus to make it safe for everyone and to make their own stress levels manageable. So I think that is great. I look forward to hearing about the PD that we hopefully will put in place so that we can make this job more enjoyable and more safe, not only for the students, but also for the drivers and our employees themselves. So I think I'm hopeful that those things will change. The staffing and the number of openings that we have. I do not want to entertain changing our policy to the 2 miles unless or until we have given these changes a chance to take place. And I think that conversation would likely potentially happen at the beginning of the next school year.
Mr. Honak.
I echo. I mean, I feel the same way with a lot of the comments, and it's a tough situation. It looks like Ms. Duplain, making progress, and the 2-mile thing is desperation, but is a better choice than being unreliable. And I agree with Ms. Moran. There's a lot of things in there. It's just a tough situation.
I have no questions. I think that everybody made all my comments. I appreciate that we're trying to take care of this before we jump to 2 miles, because we know I hate that probably more than anybody, but I also understand why it may be necessary. I'm hoping that we can alleviate that problem before we have to get there. So.
Okay, so moving along, this is a new budget request that we would like the governing board to consider for fiscal year 24. That is adding a $1,000 annual stipend for additional national board certifications and adding this to the 23-24 placement charts. The following national board certifications follow a similar process of application, examination, and recertification as the National Board Certified Teacher process. And those certifications are the National Board Certification in Occupational Therapy, the National Board Certified School Counselor, and the National Board Certified School Nurse. We are aware of 2 current district employees that have these certifications who would receive these $1,000 stipends if approved, costing a total of $2,420 to the district, and that includes benefits. The goal of this recommendation is to be consistently recognizing national board certifications and the value that it brings to our students. At this time, I'd like to welcome any questions or feedback when it comes to the additional national certification stipends.
Ms. Clymer,
I'm in agreement. No other comments.
Mr. Owens,
So we don't, right now, we only know of these two.
Correct.
And this is because we were the teachers, national board certified teachers get a stipend. So now anybody who has a national board certification. These are the only three we know of right now. Are there other national board certifications?
So I researched all of the national board certifications. These are the 3 that we do not currently recognize.
And these are all part of the same program, same board, same certification, certifier, I guess, right?
They have different boards, but they're all considered when you do a search, there's actually a document that exists that talks about all the national board certifications for schools, and these are all listed on that chart.
And so I'm assuming they're like Department of Ed, right?
That's a great question. I mean, I could break out for you which national boards approve these stipends. I could certainly include that in a Friday update.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, is there multiple national boards? So I could be nationally board certified by this entity and a national board certification from this entity, right?
Yes, but it's specific based on, so for example, the national school nurse has its own board versus the national certified teacher
The
has
national
their
board, National Board of School Nurses.
Correct. That's
That
right.
is registered or an entity of the federal government or Department of Education or an LLC or not in a 501c3. What are they?
That's a
right?
great question. Let me confirm that.
And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm
Yeah,
just-
no, it's a good question.
because you can get a lot of certificates,
Sure.
trainings and things. My thing is, this is great. The explanation of the board, the teacher national certificate, all the things that they have to go through, the additional costs, the training, the added benefits. If everybody just started saying, hey, I have a certificate, right? Like it could become a slippery slope of, are we having, is there a standard that we're following? I went to the, school counselor thing and now I have a certificate. I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying?
I understand the question. Yes. So Board Member Owens, to respond to that, these are very specific national board certificates that are nationally recognized. And so there's just one, if that makes sense. So it's not like I could, to your point, they go through the same exact process as those teachers do.
I guess then my question is, who is the entity that provides this?
Sure. And I could break that out.
Okay.
Absolutely. And when, so this isn't a formal request or recommendation. So when I could certainly provide that in a Friday update. And then when we bring it for formal, I can certainly include that in the
Or
recommendation.
just an email, however.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yes.
Ms. Moran,
Yeah, as someone who is certified in my chosen profession and charges accordingly, I am 100% in favor of the stipends for certifications.
Mr. Honak,
No strong feelings. Informative. Thank you.
I also am in support of this so that we're staying aligned with what we're doing for the rest of our staff.
Thank you. All right. So this next slide is regarding a recommendation to update our stipends for athletics. We have struggled to fill and retain our athletic coach positions this year. So we would like to propose increasing the stipend for athletic coaches for the 23-24 school year. We would like to increase the coach stipend to $1,200 and the school level athletic director stipend to $2,700. The additional cost is $24,584. However, it will not increase our budget projections since we had an estimated $55,862 savings from unfilled athletic positions this school year. And that is already included in the previous budget projections that we've presented. At this time, I welcome any feedback or questions regarding increasing the athletic stipends for next school year.
Ms. Clyber.
I am in agreement that these athletic coaches are really important to students. These extracurricular activities and athletics are really important. We talked about that here. So I am in agreement that if we need some efforts to retain good coaches, I'm all for that. My question is the increase to the athletic director stipend. What impact does that have on retaining coaches?
The athletic, I can answer that in two ways for
Okay.
River Climbers. So we have that is actually a position we have struggled to fill as well this year, is the school level athletic director position. And so that would help us, we believe, to fill that role and to encourage certified staff to want to perform that role. In turn, then you have that dedicated school level director who is help coordinating and supporting those coaches. In the end, making that process and the sport, if you will, more enjoyable for those coaches. Would be
Understood.
what I would say to that.
Thank you.
Mr. Owens.
Does the athletic director coach a sport or no?
I believe
It's just the athletic
oftentimes,
director.
yeah, I believe oftentimes they probably do. Just in necessity because we have those open coach positions.
Is there the option for them to be the athletic director and coach and get both?
I believe so. Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Since they're two separate kind of lists of duties, if you will, they would be, if they're going to do both, they would be paid for both.
Okay. Yeah, I remember I volunteered for the Verado Middle School baseball team, and the athletic director, I don't know if they had him then. I think they did. Yeah, she was like in charge, but she was the softball coach. So could be opportunity. Cool. Just wanted to throw out there as a baseball coach.
Ms. Moran.
I am in support of these additional stipends 100%.
Mr. Honak.
I support it.
I also support it, but I would say that probably a reason we're having a hard time filling it is not just the money. It's that we're asking our teachers to do it and our teachers are burned out. So I think that that's part of the reason we're seeing them not want to take on extra things. So something to think about if we want people to take on some extra things that we know are important to students, we got to figure out where to not ask them to take on extra things. Just a thought for the future.
Thank you for that feedback. All right. Next topic is the base salary increase for fiscal year 24. Our current budget projections that we've discussed in our previous study sessions assumes a 2% raise for all staff for fiscal year 2024. Historically, the base salary increase is based on performance levels reached through the evaluation process. This slide shows what this looked like last year for certified teachers and classified staff. Our current compensation structure includes, and important to mention that it includes other performance-based awards outside of the base salary increase. For example, certified staff and administrative staff receive a performance award at the end of the year based on performance levels. Certified staff also receive performance pay at the end of the year related to the classroom site fund plan. Not only does our budget projections assume that all staff receive the 2% increase, but the annual compensation study also recommends that every staff member receive a 2% base increase to remain competitive. The district is recommending that the 2% base increase follows the compensation study recommendation and be given to all staff without being tied to performance evaluation levels. So at this time, I welcome any feedback or questions regarding our recommendation for the base salary increase for fiscal year 24.
Ms. Clymer.
I am aware that for the last, I think it's 2 years now, or at least maybe 18 months, we've been going through a full compensation study to make sure that we are competitive and paying appropriately at all levels. So I understand the need for us to, make sure that we're doing that across the board. So I am in support of that if that is what it takes for us to be competitive. However, I think I want a little more explanation as to it, because it seems like you're asking that this would be in effect moving forward, that we would no longer be paying those increases based on any type of performance. Is that correct? Or is this just for this year?
Our recommendation that it would be a next year and moving forward recommendation.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
That's what I assumed. And if that's the case, is the reasoning behind that because there is other compensation that's tied to, okay, I'm seeing the nodding heads, performance, that this should just be across the board and then let the other two pieces fall based on individual performance at the certified level?
Yes, Board Member Clymer, that is correct.
Okay. Okay. Yes, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Mr. Owens.
No questions.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, so my question, I have two questions. The first is, last year, how many of our certified staff did not receive the full level 3 increase?
Board Member Moran, that is a good question. I will need to get back to you with that information.
Okay, same question on the classified staff. I mean, some of the feedback I've gotten before is basically everybody gets, the top level. So if we're not really utilizing this as a merit-based performance compensation plan, then yeah, by all means, let's just make it flat across the board.
Understood, and I would agree with you.
Okay, Mr. Honak, did you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
I also have no questions.
Okay, thank you for your feedback and questions. Moving along. All right, our next topic is salary cap. The district currently has a salary cap on our placement charts. The cap applies to the annual base salary increase that we just discussed. The salary cap currently impacts one classified employee with 25 years of experience with the district and 87 certified employees with an average of 16.34 years of service in the district. In that number, we have included 9 certified employees that were grandfathered and receive a placement chart increase instead of the annual base increase. As I mentioned earlier, our budget projections assume that every employee receives the 2% annual increase. As a result, there would not be an additional cost to the projected budget that has already been presented at previous study sessions. The annual compensation study recommends as well that the salary cap not be applied to the 2% annual base increase. The district is recommending that the 2% annual base increase not be limited by the salary cap, and to be consistent with the annual compensation study recommendation. I feel it's important to note here that the salary cap will continue to be used when factoring in initial new hire placement or salary exception decisions. At this time, I welcome any questions or feedback regarding our recommendation to remove the salary cap for base salary increase.
Ms. Clymer.
I am in support of this. I think we talked about this before, that, our long-term teachers are critical to not only our student success, but our other teachers that are coming in behind them for training and support, et cetera. So I think trying to retain those teachers is important. I think this is just one piece of that giant puzzle. My question, sort of unrelated specifically to the salary cap, is before we started the compensation study 2 years ago, we had discussed moving away from placement charts and doing more, I don't know, position bands. I don't know. Jody, you may have to help me. I don't remember the exact wording, but moving away from that specifically for this reason is that we're kind of hamstringing ourselves into this box where a lot of people don't fit anymore. And so then we have to do other considerations to increase and make it more fair for their years of service and things like that. So now it seems like we're slowly getting there, but what is the grand plan in terms of placement charts? And are we going to just kind of do this one thing at a time, or is there a strategy that says, no, we're going to redo placement charts altogether, and maybe in a year or two, whatever that might look like, and then all of these questions will really go away because they'll be answered by that solution?
So I'm going to start answering it one way because there's a lot of different factors that impact this. So when the compensation study was done, just in the nature of how the data was pulled from other districts, when the consultant was comparing our salary charts to medians of other districts, it's naturally pulling all of our positions into those bands that were recommended, because the consultant is comparing those similar positions on our charts to a band in another district. So by following the compensation study recommendations, even without changing our titles, we're naturally converging on that sort of banding approach, because even though there's separate positions on our salary schedule, you'll notice in a lot of instances, it's the same salary schedule, just with a different title.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one item that's happening. The other thing, and we're actually talking about it tonight, I believe it's literally the next topic, is the salary exception discussion. And I don't want to steal Leanne's thunder there, but that will also both help address what you're talking about, as well as the compensation study recommendations. It would be a much larger project than what Leanne and I could do in our first budget season with the district to completely revamp all district positions into those bands. But even just naturally with what we are doing, it is moving us towards that from a compensation perspective.
Is that the goal, in your opinion, that we will get there? I mean, that's initially what we talked about a while ago, but is that still the strategy that we're working towards?
So yes, there's just some additional work that needs to be done on exactly how we do that.
Okay.
What you call certain positions, what positions fit in the different bands. And we just need some more time to work through that.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think anybody's telling you guys how to do that this year. Just want to clarify. We understand that's a lot. Although I think you guys can do anything personally, but.
Oh, no, that wasn't a knock on not doing it this year. I'm just asking, are we moving in that direction? We're changing little pieces of it here and there. And I knew that eventually we were hoping to get there. So if that's the case, then these changes make a lot of sense, because every small step helps us get in another year to where we want to be. And then it's easier to make that change. So I'm in support of all of these changes. I just want to make sure we're still headed in that general direction.
Mr. Owens.
Makes sense. Thanks. No questions.
Ms. Moran.
Yes, I asked a clarifying question in advance of the meeting regarding the salary cap, and I fear that question was misconstrued, that I do not support the removal of the salary cap. I actually do support the removal of the salary cap because I agree with Board Member Clymer that our long-standing, very experienced teachers are one of our greatest assets. And so my question really comes into play with, do we need to change this policy? Because basically we come back every year and say, let's remove the salary cap. And some of our very experienced teachers get a little nervous every time that we have to have this conversation. And so I'm just not really sure that this policy is serving us in the way that we want it to. But did I hear you, Executive Director Vaughn, say that basically this salary cap issue will be resolved in time based on what you believe the plan will be, with switching more to a band versus a placement chart strategy?
So to clarify, I think some of the other issues will be addressed that way, but for the cap, just to clarify our recommendation is moving forward that the cap is not applied to the base salary increase, and that it's truly only considered when doing initial placements and salary exceptions.
Okay, so you're
that-
asking us to remove the salary cap for all base increases going forward. It would only be for initial placement or salary exceptions for new employees, that we would even consider anything called a salary cap.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Honak,
I'm generally in support. Thank you.
I'm in support of this.
Thank you again for your feedback. All right, our next thing, so carrying on this conversation about our compensation structure, is to discuss the salary exception process. So the placement chart currently reflects experience up to 6 years of experience of the candidate. When the district receives a request from a candidate to consider placement based on more years of verified experience than our current placement chart presents, the superintendent will review and approve a salary exception to be placed on a governing board agenda for approval. We would like to expedite this process and consistently consider candidates' verified experience for salary placement by adding the presented language to the placement charts. Oops, staying on there. By placing new hires based on years of verified related experience, we will also address a recommendation from the annual compensation study related to competitive pay for years of experience. This will also expedite the start date for new hires. We will continue to bring salary exception requests that ask the district to consider more than additional years of experience to both the superintendent and the governing board for approval. An example of this type of a request might be the request to match a current salary of a recruited candidate. So at this time, I welcome any feedback or questions regarding our recommendation to update the placement charts regarding the salary exception process, and that we will place candidates based on years of verified experience.
Ms. Clymer.
I am in support of this. It sounds like it'll make your job more efficient in terms of the hiring process and just getting people through that process when we know that we're probably going to do that anyway. So it makes sense. Just one very quick question. How is the 1% determined per year? I mean, that figure.
That is a great question. I couldn't answer that. I know that our charts have been based on the difference between years of experience has always been a calculation of 1% per each year.
Up to 6 years right now. So from 0 to 6 years, as you go up the chart, it's 1% increments now. So you're just saying we're just going to elongate that up to the cap.
Oh, yes.
So
I understand the question.
you've been doing 1%. So we're just going to continue doing 1%.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Understood.
Sorry, I misunderstood the question.
No. You were answering it correctly, but thank you.
And that is in large part what we've been doing for the salary exceptions that have come to the board. So what this would allow us to do is just make that the consistent practice. And the other benefit to it, so one of the reasons the salary study showed that we didn't support experience as much as other districts was other districts' salary charts go out further, say 10 years. And so the consultant was comparing that 10-year figure to our 6-year figure and not considering the fact that regularly we do award for additional experience. So what this would allow us to do is very consistently compensate potential employees for their years of experience.
Mr. Owens.
Thanks. That question actually helped my question, but the way I read this, because you said 1% for the first 6 years, and then it stops. Do we want it to say the district will provide, or the district may provide up to an additional 1% per year, right? I mean, because if a teacher is coming over and the salary exception, or, like match my salary from where I'm leaving, and if they've 8 years and it's not more, it's not outside the exception, so you don't have to get it approved, but maybe it's less than 8% of what. Does that make sense? Like, so you wouldn't need to go a full 2%, but you could say, hey, we'll match it. Right. So you don't have to provide them the full 2%. And I'm not trying to, you want to nickel and dime, but at the same time, if I'm a teacher and it's like, cool, 9 years, I'm going to get 9%, or, then what, an extra 3%, but we don't need to give them that. Right.
So you could, I think what we've discovered even to a certain extent with our current salary exception process is you end up with discrepancies in what individuals with similar years of experience in education are making, which can be fine, but it also can cause some strife among employees if that becomes well known. But
Yeah, I mean,
it's a solid point that
I'm just saying this pigeonholes us.
Yes.
This is your thing. You've got 9 years experience. We're giving you 9%. There's no, if that's what we want to tie ourselves to, that's what we're doing here. And I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I'm just, at least I haven't heard about it.
Sure.
So.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I support the clarity. I think it's great that potential employees will be able to clearly see where they're going to land, and it prevents the board from having to approve, in most cases, a salary exception that, as was stated earlier, can sometimes hold up the hiring process. So I know for me, when I look at those salary exceptions, I always look at, well, what were they making before? And the administration wouldn't be asking for an exception if they weren't making more than what would have been on our placement chart. So it is an issue that comes up as an exception very often. And so I'm glad to see that we're going to change our policy so that an exception actually is something that is exceptional and not actually the rule to how we end up hiring folks with experience.
Mr. Honak.
I'm generally in support. My only question is if this is clarity, we're codifying it, does it mean that we are going to be paying people for years of experience when we didn't have to?
Board Member Honak, can you please restate that? I want to make sure I understood the question.
Well, if someone, is this just a hard and fast rule that will be codified? If we cap it at 6%, which I think is what it is right now, 6 years experience, or expand it further, is it something that automatically an applicant is going to see that as a potential that they're going to be paid because they have 10 years of experience, or 6 years, let's say currently? Or is this something that is used as an exception for an exceptional candidate that we want to reward them or need to? They're very valuable. We want them, and we have to do this to match their salary. So is it just automatically, because you could have somebody that comes in with 6 years experience and maybe they're not all that great, so that's my question. Is it automatic, or is it or is it one that is at the discretion of the hiring process?
Thank you, Board Member Honak, for that clarification. So to answer that, it would be, so maybe I can answer how we currently place a candidate, and then I'll specifically answer that question. So currently, if a candidate comes in with 6 years of verified experience, we place them at 6 years. So what we're proposing is if a candidate comes in with verified 10 years of experience, then we would place them at 10 years of experience. So it would be consistently applied.
Thank you. Very clear.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I am fully in support of this, and I'm fully in support of us having this be transparent for people that are going to come work for us. I think it's going to be a great way to recruit people to know that we're not just stopping at 6 years, that their years of experience will be valued in our district.
Thank you. I believe now I'm turning it back over to Executive Director Vaughn.
All right. We've already spent some time on this slide tonight, but as we close up discussions, I just wanted to revisit it as a summation of where we would be budget-wise with all of the administrative recommendations. The administrative recommendations presented thus far would have us needing to cut 3.5 million by fiscal year 2026 to balance the budget. And we can see, depending on some of the options we do with the classified specialist positions, where that would land us. Where I'd like to spend a little bit more time, though, is what we plan to do moving forward. And based on some of the discussion tonight, I believe we're aligned in some of the next steps. As we move closer to finalizing the budget for next year, I just wanted to provide this summation. So after we approve the budget for next year, I will turn my focus from a budget perspective to 2025 and 2026. As a reminder, we hope to bring our budget recommendations for actual approval at April 11th board meeting. Our plan is to have internal teams prioritize all spending over a certain dollar threshold to help identify potential items for consideration for cuts. And our hope is to identify candidates of at least twice the needed cuts to start gathering data next school year on those items to help inform decisions on what to cut in the future. The idea being giving us some time to gather that data to make more informed decisions as we start to have those discussions. At this time, we're available to answer any questions you might have on that.
Ms. Clymer,
No questions. Thank you.
Mr. Owens,
No questions. Thank you.
Ms. Moran,
No questions. I like the plan.
Mr. Honak.
No questions. Thank you.
I have no questions either. Can you tell we're all excited to be moving on? Is that all the stuff for budget? Are we done with it? Oh, okay. We are all done with our budget discussion. I'm actually going to have us take a 2-minute break if that's okay, and we will come back. Ms. Moran and Mr. Honak back.
Honak is back.
Moran is back.
Perfect. We are going to just keep moving along. Next thing on the agenda is going to be our action discussion items. Item AA is the approval of, yes, right? Sorry, approval of the new certified stipend endorsement certificate, if that will be done by Ms. Reichs. I can't talk today.
Good evening. Yes, I'm speaking again. So on May 10th of 2022, the governing board approved our extracurricular training and other stipends for this school year. District administration is recommending an additional endorsement certificate stipend in the amount of $100 per endorsement. For this school year, the 22-23 school year, that endorsement will be used for the 90-hour gifted full endorsement. So our recommendation would be that the governing board approve the request for this endorsement certificate stipend so that we can add it to our placement charts for this year and moving forward.
Ms. Clymer, do you have any questions or comments?
No.
Mr. Owens? Ms. Moran?
No questions.
Mr. Honak?
No questions.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the new certified stipend for endorsement certificates as presented.
I will second. Having a first and a second, I will go through the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Mr. Honak?
Yay.
I'm a yay. Motion passes. Okay, next on the agenda is the construction of module classroom portables at Belen Soto and Verado Elementary School. This will be presented by Mr. Vaughn and also Dan. We're excited to hear from you. We haven't heard from you in a while.
I'm going to get us started though. Sorry. Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, colleagues and community, thank you for joining me tonight to talk about adding modular classroom space to Belen Soto and Verado Elementary Schools. The district has begun the planning process for adding portables to these sites in an attempt to address needs for additional classroom space to service projected student growth at both campuses. Currently, Belen Soto serves approximately 1,026 students and is projected to grow to 1,259 by 2025 and 1,903 by 2032. Based on the most recent demographer projections. The facilities team completed an initial review of the school site to determine potential locations for portable buildings, and then met with a firm specializing in the design and construction of portable classrooms. Based on this meeting and walking the school site, the firm was able to provide more definitive plans to allow for budget planning and procurement process to begin. On Thursday, March 2nd, the design company provided initial budget planning figures and drawings for the work to include adding 5 portable classrooms to Belen Soto. These portable classrooms would allow the school to service an additional 140 students with the current configuration of the campus based on board-approved class sizes. Similarly, Verado Elementary currently services approximately 825 students and is projected to grow to 910 students by next year and 1,118 by 2032, based on the most recent demographer update. A similar review process occurred for Verado Elementary, as did Belen Soto, and the design firm was able to provide planning and documents for adding 2 portable classrooms to the campus. Less classrooms were proposed for Verado due to space limitations on the campus. Using board-approved class sizes, the current configuration of the campus, this will allow Verado to service approximately 54 additional students. The planning budgets for these 2 projects are $950,000 for Verado and $1,975,000 for the Belen Soto portables. These figures are initial budget planning numbers and include a 10% contingency. However, these dollar amounts are only preliminary estimates and are likely to change as plans finalize later in the building process. Capital funds or existing bond funds would be used to support these projects if approved. Along with these modular classrooms, we are also working on modifying existing space at these schools to create more classrooms. The district is considering these items as part of a longer-term capital plan to meet the projected growth of the district. The administration hopes to bring discussion for a potential bond program to the governing board at the April study session, which will likely include the recommendation of a new school for the district. At this time, Dan and I are available to answer any questions you might have.
Ms. Clymer, did you have any questions?
My only question is, Dan, December. That's it. That's the question. That feels like a long way away. Is there any possibility that this is going to get done sooner than that?
Not really. Madam
Hey,
President.
be honest, I'm
members
here.
of the governing board. There's a lot of different permitting that has to occur with portable classrooms. And currently their projections are actually further on than December. So we're looking at best case scenario, absolute best case scenarios.
So
that we can get
minimum a
something.
year probably is what
We're trying our best. We're going to do everything we can to get them in as soon as we can. But like I said, there's just,
yeah.
there's a lot of different hurdles that we need to overcome.
Okay. And reassure us all that, these two campuses are beautiful and fairly new in the district, and these are not going to be eyesores. So here's your 30 seconds of fame to convince all of us parents that it's not going to ruin the beautiful architecture of our campuses.
Yeah. We're working with a really good firm. They've already looked at the designs. You have a few sketches of what they could look like. So they're looking at the existing campus, the different architectural elements to make sure that they blend in as best that they can. I'm not saying that they will. They are portable classrooms. They're not CMU. They're not going to match exactly. But we're going to try to keep the same looking carpets inside. So inside it's going to look as if you're in a regular classroom. We're going to have different areas that we have in our typical classroom. So we're trying to make it so the students, when they enter, they're going to feel like they're in a regular classroom that they would be if they went into the regular school that's right next to them. So we're trying to focus on that part. But also it will look good from the outside. We're doing our best to make that meld into the campus and to the community.
Okay.
And Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the benefits with the process that we're looking at with potential approval tonight is these would be classrooms that are built specifically for Litchfield to help address some of those issues. It's not, off some assembly line that any district would get that exact same model.
That's correct. They're going to be built to our specifications. It's not something that they go down the street and pick one up and drop it off at our site. They're not going to look like any portable that you've probably seen in any other district or site, because they're going to be built for us in a facility down in Tucson. They ship them up here. Once they build them down there, they ship them up here and place them on our site. They'll be right on the ground. They won't be risen up off the ground like you'll typically see on portables. So we won't have risers or stairs to get up inside the rooms. They're going to be on a pad. They're going to be almost semi-permanent. You can almost look at it that way. So it'll be what it is.
I'm sure it will be
Yeah,
fantastic.
It will be. It will be.
Last question is, do the costs here include the interiors, furniture, technology, all of that we will need to, as you said, make it look exactly like as if they were in a regular classroom? Is this cost only the exterior?
That cost will be, basically the shell, the furniture, not the furniture, but it'll be the carpets, the walls,
Okay.
the marker boards, and all those fixed assets that'll be inside. The furniture will come throughout the district. We have furniture throughout the district that we can use. So it'll look like what they're used to seeing, the students. No, it does not include some of the technology, some of the other soft costs that you'll see in a campus.
But we have that allocated somewhere to do that. Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Owens.
So these are the two schools that I've been to the showcase so far, which is kind of cool. Both of those campuses, Verado and Belen Soto, didn't have a library because it was being used for classrooms. Will this help with that, or is this just because of additional growth?
It is because of additional growth. So when we look at the demographer's projections, even into next year, and the number of teachers that we would need to add to support that growth, just with governing board approved class sizes, we need to make some of these changes just to have classrooms to put those additional teachers in. And because of the timeline of these portables, they may not be the solution for next year, even though they could help the year after. That's why we're also looking at modifications to the existing facilities.
So December dream, not going to happen. So January or August 2024, new school year, they'll be ready to go. And it's cool. This is more for now, the more kids that we have, not you get your library back. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, their hope, of
That's-
course, is to get their
sorry.
library back. I think that's definitely their plan, but yeah. Right.
And that's where when I was talking about, potential discussion of a bond program that would include a potential new school, that's where you might potentially, get your library back.
Yeah, for sure.
Ms. Moran.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, from conversation with Principal Fraser at the Belen Soto tour, she is hopeful that she will get at least a portion of her library back, if and when these portables are put in place. And obviously the construction of a new school hopefully would help with the boundary areas in that area as well. The only thing I would like to say about the portables in general are many, many years ago, we added portables to Palm Valley Elementary. And today, if you were to go to that campus, people are just so used to it. It's not something that's new. So I understand that it's going to change potentially the look of these two campuses initially, but I don't want people to think that portables mean temporary. These are going to be structures that will be put in place and will not have a plan to be removed anytime really going forward. So it is Dan said it's semi-permanent, but it's really, I think in all of our times here, it'll be a permanent solution to some of these overcrowding issues that we have on these campuses. And those buildings look great. They're not 100% seamless, but I am confident that our teams have always done a great job in making our campuses look beautiful. And I don't think these portables would be any exception to that.
Mr. Honak.
Question, Dan, are these basically going to be, in a nutshell, steel buildings on slabs?
They'll have stucco siding on the outside. They will sit on a slab. They are going to be built in a facility and then trucked into place. So I suppose in a nutshell, yes, that sounds.
Yeah, they are. No, they're doing a great job with steel buildings. A lot of places are doing it instead of tilt ups. As a matter of fact, they're building at Costco. And then my other question is just completely silly. When they started Verado, they had a bunch of temporary classrooms, and did anybody look in storage to see if we can pull them out and fix them up? Don't answer that question. Thank you.
If we can underperform and under promise and overperform, that's always our goal.
Thank you.
We'll get them there.
I don't have any questions. Sorry. I agree, though, that we should acknowledge that these are not semi-permanent. Scott Libby has portable buildings that are used. My kids have gone to class there, had multiple classes in the permanent, in the portable buildings, and they've been perfectly fine. So it will be great. And it will help some more kids be able to stay at Belen Soto and Verado, and us as board not have to tell some parents, oh, even though you live in the boundaries, you cannot go there because our schools are absolutely over capacity and we can't take you. So I am all in favor of doing anything we can to not have that conversation with those parents. think we need a motion.
I move to approve the construction of modular classroom portables at Belen Soto Elementary School and Verado Elementary School as presented.
I second.
Okay, having a first and a second, I will go through the vote. Ms. Clymer,
Yay.
Mr. Owens,
Yay.
Ms. Moran,
Yay.
Mr. Honak.
Yay.
I'm also a yay. The motion passes. And we are going to move on to the next section of the agenda, which is the information discussion section. First on the agenda is the school district spending report. This is going to be done by Mr. Vaughn. It's for discussion only.
Madam President, members of the governing board, Superintendent Gunning, colleagues and community, thank you for joining me tonight to discuss the school district spending report published by the Arizona Auditor General's Office. This report, published by the Auditor General, is meant to meet the requirements for their office to monitor the percentage of each dollar spent in the classroom by Arizona school districts. The report was initially released this year on March 1st and is available on the Auditor General's website for all districts. Tonight, we'll be walking through the report specifically for Litchfield. The report looks at spending of school districts and breaks down that spending into several different categories. The highest level of these categories are operational spending and non-operational spending. Operational spending is your day-to-day spending and are coded in our accounting system and in the data shared with the Auditor General's office to allow for comparison across districts in the nation. Operational spending can be further broken down into classroom spending and non-classroom spending. Classroom spending by the Auditor General's definition includes instructional, student support, and instructional support expenses. Instruction is primarily your teachers and instructional aides, as well as instructional supplies and athletics. Those expenses touching primarily instruction and directly instruction of students. Student support is focused on additional services students need to be successful and can include counselors, special education related service providers such as speech pathologists, nurses, and attendant services, to name just a few broad categories of spending considered student support. Instructional supports are focused on supporting the teachers and instructional personnel as opposed to the students. So they include librarians, teacher training, curriculum development, special education directors, and instruction-related technology services, as well as other spending focused on supporting that instruction element. These three areas in total, as you'll see on a future slide, make up the classroom spending shown in this report. Non-classroom operational spending covers spending areas in the areas of administration, plant operations, food service, and transportation. A description of each is shown on the slide. Non-operational spending includes spending to acquire capital assets such as equipment, land, and buildings like the portables we just approved, as well as associated financing costs. Also considered non-operational is civic activities such as allowing our facilities to be rented out by community groups. This slide is a screenshot from the report and shows that the district's classroom spending is 73.6%, with 60.1% of that being direct instructional expenses. And just as a reminder, this was for the fiscal year 2022. As part of this report, the Auditor General's Office also places districts in a variety of peer groups for comparison. This slide shows our peer group for instructional spending. We spent the highest proportion of our dollars on instruction of any district in our peer group in fiscal year 2022. This slide shows a year-over-year comparison of spending per student in various areas. You can see that spending increased from 2021 to 2022, and that was supported by the increased funding received from the state. Significant areas of increase included instruction, food service, land and buildings. Instruction would have increased due to raises provided. Food service would have been impacted by increased operations with everyone returning to school. And land and building is being impacted in large part by the construction of the White Tanks Learning Center. This report also works to provide insight into areas districts can potentially improve their efficiency and operations by comparing spending between similar peer districts. According to the Arizona Auditor General, our administrative spending is considered very low. Our spending on maintaining our facilities is comparable, and we have less square footage per student than our peer districts. Our food service spending and transportation spending is also considered very low. Ultimately, this report is showing that in 2022, the district operated efficiently, and this allowed us to push as much into the classroom as we did. This slide shows the increase in our average teacher salary since 2017 and the average years of experience of our educators. This highlights the work we've done to maintain our competitive stance with teacher pay. This slide uses that same peer group analysis that we saw before to show our average teacher pay in comparison to our peers. Again, this was 2022 data. We are well above the average for our peers and second only behind Alhambra in our peer group for average teacher compensation. And that's pretty consistent with what we saw with the compensation study that we're fairly competitive. The report also includes the summary of student achievement, which shows that as we know, Litchfield outperforms our peers and the state averages on state assessments. At this time, I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Ms. Clymer,
No questions.
Mr. Owens,
Yeah, no questions. I do have a question. It's probably, how do we spend so much less per meal? Like, I don't understand that. That's like another question for another time.
Ms. Moran,
No questions. I love the Auditor General's report. I think the graphics that they use are very simple and succinct and easy to understand. And I'm really happy that we are going over this information as we usually do in a public meeting, because my understanding is there has been some feedback provided specifically during the superintendent feedback sessions about our operations and our administrative spending. And I think getting this information from an independent source, being the Auditor General, and being able to see some of the transparency behind those numbers should be really eye-opening to members of our constituency who want to critique, and this just lays the facts out for them to be able to see exactly where we stand compared to the state and compared to our peers, and the fact that our administration should be given kudos for the fact that we have more dollars going into the classroom, we're paying our teachers more, and we're running this district very efficiently. So we're doing more with less. And I commend everyone in the administration for making those decisions to make sure that that happens. So thank you.
Mr. Honak.
It's a good report.
I don't have any questions either. It just shows what rock stars Litchfield is. And this is why people want to send their kids here. This is why people want to work for us. And this is why we are going to continue to be amazing. So thank you to our staff that helps keep us on track and staying this way every year. We were going to nix this, if that's okay, unless you're really raring to go, Superintendent Gunning. Do you think this will be very fast?
I think I could be pretty fast.
Okay, well then we are going to move on to the next agenda item, which is the employee engagement survey results. That's going to be presented by Superintendent Gunning.
Madam President, members of the governing board, this is the same format as we share all of our survey results. So I'll just jump to the meat of it. If you notice on this survey result, we did not compare it to previous years because it was a brand new survey where they revamped the questions. So the scores that we did receive was a 4.04 and 858 employees took this. Just on a count number, because we're always trying to increase participation, we had 403 last year. So a nice increase. You're always wanting to be in that 4 to 5 range. That slide is just where our principals are able to set their goals in our departments for their next steps. Our highest scoring is they believe their work positively impacts those they serve, clear understanding of expectations, and a clear understanding of the mission and goals of the organization. The lowest scoring items is the organization level resources are allocated to maximize effectiveness. Information communicated in a timely manner across the organization and feel supported in balancing my work responsibilities. So those are the items, is just to review the highest scoring items. Each campus and department review those and talk about what they do to contribute to that so they can keep doing those amazing things. Their lowest scoring items, then they would look at what would a 5 look like in those areas so that they can then pick 2 strategic actions to target improvement in those areas. We have wrapped up in the midst of getting back our parent and student surveys so that we will roll those out to you all in April or May.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions, Ms. Clymer?
No, I guess just one comment in looking over our feedback for the superintendent position. I think we saw that there was a lot of engagement and a lot of respect for the colleagues at the school level. And I think that you see that here, right? People feel like they have purpose, they're connected. We're losing a little bit of that connection at the district level, but I think that's to be expected, right? We have 16 schools, we have, thousands of children and employees and all that kind of stuff. So that doesn't shock me all that much, and still, doubling our participation, which is amazing. Congratulations, by the way. And still remaining in that 4 to 5 category. I mean, I think it just shows that we're as we've implemented these surveys over time, we're getting better and better in terms of the rollout and then really identifying those 1 or 2 specific things and working on those year after year. So congratulations. It's a great survey.
Thank you.
Mr. Owens?
Yeah, it looks good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Moran?
No questions. I'm happy with the increase in participation. I think that's great. So I appreciate that.
Mr. Honak?
Good report.
I also have no questions. Thank you for putting this together. And that was very fast. That makes me happy. So that wraps up all of our discussion items. So
I move to adjourn the meeting.
I will second.
okay, having a motion and a first, I will call for the vote. Ms. Clymer?
Yay.
Mr. Owens?
Yay.
Ms. Moran?
Yay.
Mr. Honak?
Yay.
I'm also a yay. The meeting